Hey everybody, CO, and welcome back to Comics and Dragons. I'm Lance White Eagle, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about comic books. This is going to be kind of an introduction to comic books for people who are unfamiliar with the medium or who decided they liked the movies or the recent TV shows and things that have been influxed into the mainstream that are based on comic properties. So let's get started here with some of the terminology that you'll hear when you start looking into comic books. Um, Most often, when you hear somebody refer to a comic, they mean a single issue like this one here. Single issues come out for an individual series, usually once a month. For some of the bigger titles and bigger characters, they're weekly or every other week. It kind of depends on the publisher and on the popularity of the character. But by and large, when somebody says they're reading a comic, they mean one of these single issues. Other than those, your other options are the trade paperbacks. Trade paperbacks are a collection of single issues put together. They usually contain a single story arc, and they're generally about 4 to 6 issues. And you have a whole story, a whole storyline in this single book. It's so you don't have to go out and find the individual issues of a comic or of a story that you want to read. This one in particular, we're going to be talking about in a later video. We're going to have a full video just on the Vox Machina origins because it's Critical Role and it's comic books, and it's those two things together, and it makes me happy. Your other option is a hardcover trade, which is pretty much just the same as the trade paperback. It's a collection of single issues put together for convenience. Trades usually come out a couple of months after an arc has finished, so you can go out, pick up a trade, and read your story arc. You also hear people use the term graphic novel, which really is just a fancy way of saying comic book, because the term comic book has connotations that people are trying to avoid. A lot of people still associate comic books with kids. But really, comics are like any other form of literature. There's a wide range of different varieties for different types of people. And it's always been that way. Even back in the 50s, you had like EC Comics, who was doing Tales from the Crypt, which kids bought at the time, but it really was not for kids. And if those writers were writing it for kids, that's a little troubling, I think, because the old Tales from the Comic show, every episode of the show was actually just pulled from a comic that EC had put out in the 40s or 50s. But most often, I think now when you hear somebody refer to graphic novel, they mean something like V for Vendetta or Watchmen, a story where you have to read the whole set for it to make sense. Generally, with comic books like Avengers or X-Men, even if you don't have the full arc, you can read an individual issue, and that issue should have some kind of action, some kind of resolution, and it be self-contained. With what I refer to anyway as graphic novels, you can't really read the individual issue and have a self-contained story. You have to read the whole set. And things like Watchmen, V for Vendetta are some of the most famous of those. Both of those books by Alan Moore, who really likes his kind of political and grand philosophical ideas in his comics. So if you're into that kind of thing, you could check out some of Alan Moore's stuff. Watchmen is a really good read. It's not my personal favorite, but I appreciate what it did kind of for the comic book genre. Even before the movies, before the TV shows, Watchmen kind of elevated the public opinion of comics to a different level, even though they had always really been at that level, in my opinion. Um, but the popularity of it, the fact that Watchmen got taught in some college courses, really kind of brought a new appreciation for comics from people who, in years past, kind of had looked down on it. Another great way to read comics is online. Uh, Comixology and Marvel Unlimited are, I think, the two biggest resources for online comic books. Uh, on both of those, you can buy individual issues or you can pay a monthly fee and read a whole catalog of older issues of comics and newer are up there. And sometimes, especially if you want to go back to the older ones and read through classic storylines like the Phoenix Saga or Days of Future Past, things like that. It's much cheaper to go the digital route. The comics collectors market is still very, very prevalent. So, like, if you're a Rogue fan and you want to read the first appearance of Rogue, uh, it's hard to track down, and when you do track it down, sometimes it can be pricey. So it's really more convenient to go through Marvel Unlimited, to go through something like Comixology, to look at those old issues that you may not want to invest the money in for a collectible purpose. You just want to read a comic book about a character that you like. Um, so yeah, I think that just about covers it. Uh, One more thing we can touch on is how to read a comic book. Uh, you, I've had some questions from people I know about how to follow the panels, and a lot of that comes down to whoever's doing the layout. It comes down to the artist, um, but by and large, they should be pretty easy to follow. Generally, especially with the big two companies, the panels and the page layout is pretty simple. You just read left to right. You go down all the panels on one page, and then you go down the panels on the other page. Where it gets a little confusing is some of the splash pages or art pieces that are larger and they have to fit the other panels in around it. But generally, I think you can figure out, especially if it's a good artist, especially if the layout is done well. It's pretty easy to follow. Don't let that hold you back. And using the online resources, it's much easier if that's an issue for you. They have a setting where you go panel by panel. The panel fills up the screen of your phone or your tablet, and you just swipe as you're reading, and it will take you through each individual panel in the order they're meant to be read. And then if it's something larger, it will actually automatically zoom out to show you the full page, so you can get the full view of what's going on. Uh, and the only other that I can think of, your only other kind of option are some of these with the bigger titles. They've released these massive collections, these big compendiums. And that's another route that you can go if you want to, say, read the entirety of The Walking Dead. It's much easier to pick up one of these big boys and go through it that way than it is to track down individual issues or even to collect the individual trades. So the compendiums are out there. That's another kind of option for your comic book reading. As we go forward on the channel, I'm going to go through individual runs and comic series that I really like and that I think you guys may find interesting. The first one of which is going to be, I already kind of showed it a little bit, Kelly Thompson's run with Gambit and Rogue, because I just picked these up not long ago at my local comic book store and really quite enjoyed them. She did everything I could ask for two of my favorite comic book characters. So I'm going to do a video on that. That'll probably be the next comic book video. And then we're going to cover some other interesting ones. Like I said, the Critical Role comic, we're going to go into Rat Queens, which if you're looking for a comic book to pick up and you are a D&D fan, this is highly recommended. This is not a kid-friendly book. There's lots of coarse language and graphic content in here, but it's funny. There's a lot of action in it. There's some plot twist, and it's a really good comic series. But we're going to break some of those down individually going forward, talk about some kind of famous story arcs. If you're looking for work on modern comics, I'm not going to do reviews of modern issues or weekly comics coming out. If you're looking for that, the best place, in my opinion, to go is Comic Book University. Just type it into the search bar right above here, and that'll take you to Professor Bill's channel. And he does weekly reviews of comics. He does character breakdowns, explaining some of the characters that are featured in the TV shows and the movies that are coming out. And Comic Book University actually really helped me get back into comic books. I had kind of gone away from the genre for a while, and watching his channel kind of made me excited to see what's currently going on in the world of comics. So be sure to check out Professor Bill and Comic Book University. When you get there, you can tell him that Lance sent you. It won't do anything for you. It won't benefit you in any way. But, hey, it's free advertisement for me. So, yeah, that's a good place to go for weekly reviews and new comics coming out. So that's it for this episode. That's it for the kind of beginner's guide to comic books. If you have any questions, if there's anything you would like to know comic related, or any storylines you'd like to hear me talk about, drop them in the comments below. And while you're there, let me know your favorite comics. Let me know your favorite characters, what got you into comic books. And if you're looking for suggestions on what to read, let me know what kind of things you're interested in, and I can probably come up with a suggestion for you. So I look forward to reading your comments. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the little bell if you want to get notified when a new video goes up. And we'll see you next time. Until then, happy trails, and thanks for watching Comics and Dragons.